Good morning. Today we'll be talking about Moderna and its supply chain, and more specifically, the supply chain on their COVID-19 vaccine. We'll start by the introduction about the company, then we'll see their strategy, then we'll be focusing on manufacturing and logistic function of their supply chain. We will see also ethical considerations that are attached to it, and we will finish with the analysis of competition in the pharmaceutical industry for the COVID-19 vaccine. Moderna is a biotech company based in America, and their main objective is the drug development and discovery and vaccine technologies based on messenger RNA. This messenger is a molecule that is relaying DNA information to the cell's protein-making machinery. Since the outbreak in January 2020, they've been competing against giants in the pharmaceutical industry such as Pfizer and Merck for the development of the COVID-19 vaccine. Their mission is to deliver on the promise of mRNA science to create a new generation of transformative medicines for patients. They are delivering to the market an innovative products, and therefore they need to have an effective and responsive supply chain that will allow them to deliver the product as quick as possible to the market. That's why they implemented digitization along their activities as well as supply chain, and this became a core attribute and competitive advantage for the company. They developed an in-house digital IT platform and environment, and the benefit from it since it brings to them quality, scalability, speed, and cost efficiencies.
For manufacturing a vaccine, it's actually quite complicated and requires certain key stages. First, you start with research and development, where scientists study the immune system to find the optimal antigen. And it's followed by clinical trials, which usually include three phases. The first phase would require testing to a small group that evaluate the safety and its effectiveness. And in the second phase, you would try to decide the optimal dose amount. And in the third phase, you would test this on a larger population base on the effectiveness of the vaccine. And then you would assemble raw materials needed for this vaccine. So things like temperature controlled container, chemicals, vaccine components, needles, and glass vials. Then what you would need to have, it's a large scale production facility, and you need to put all the key components to be manufactured on a large scale. And then it's followed by filing and intermediate approval. The finished vaccines will be used to fill the syringes and tubes. The last step is to package all the vaccine to allocate to the country where it's needed the most. Moderna, in this case, has co-located their research development and manufacturing place so they could speed up the process.
The logistics parts of this vaccine is very important because once they already have manufactured the vaccine, they have to worry about distributing it to the whole world basically. It is estimated that by 2021, over 2 billion vaccines will have to be distributed around the whole world. And this is a lot of work, obviously. We divided the logistics in three parts. First of all, storage, then transportation, and then implementation. Storage is very important because will have to take into consideration a couple of factors. For example, temperature, inventory, management, and safety, mostly hygiene. On the other hand, the transportation will have to be via ground, via air, or the sea. Lots of companies, for example, UPS, have been contacted already in order to start proceeding and start anticipating this huge logistical procedure. And then finally, the implementation. We believe there will be two ways to implement the vaccine. First of all, it will be vaccination sites, and second, home delivery procedures.
As for the ethical considerations, Moderna must ensure to find a way to give all countries in need access to the vaccine. The UN names 91 countries that are particularly vulnerable to the effects and the virus itself. Those countries are divided into three categories, namely the least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states. In total, those three categories in 91 countries, including those categories, have a population of more than 1 billion people. And the majority of them depend on revenue streams coming from either tourism, remittances, or access to the global markets. The coronavirus has virtually wiped out all sort of tourism. Remittances are also being in danger since many of their relatives living and working in other countries have lost their jobs, and access to global markets has also become much more difficult due to regulations and other things that have changed with the virus. The danger with that is that there's a very high probability that those developing and underdeveloped countries are going to be further marginalized on a global scale and on a more regional scale as well.
Contrary to what one might believe, the mortality rate isn't the primary concern in these countries. For reasons that remain yet unknown, the mortality rate in these countries appears to be lower than in more developed ones. The economic implications that virus all have on these countries in both the long and the short term are, however, tragic. In fact, the government is in a greater part of these countries don't have the way to mediate the local economy a similar way, which why the economic breakdown is turning out to be increasingly more likely consistently. That will endure essentially more and more than different nations are more extended to the pandemic keeps going. Those 91 countries will suffer significantly more and longer than countries in more developed regions. As long as they cannot contain the virus, their economy will be operating at even lower level than before. In addition to what was said, the UN fears that the health crisis is only the beginning and that the virus will in the long run have implications on several factors such as education, meaning that millions of children will be deprived from attending schools physically, food security, causing domestic food production, trade and transport suffer as well. That paired with a likely to be crashing economy makes political instability within the country very likely. In the worst but not unlikely case, this could lead the conflicts of leaving those countries even further behind. The way of distribution of vaccines should be considered in these countries on the same level of importance, because depriving those more than 1 billion people of what is currently perhaps the most important vaccine for financial reasons cannot be accepted.
Now let's analyze competition and differences in supply chain for Moderna. Moderna's main competition is Pfizer and AstraZeneca, as the three of them are the major frontrunners of the COVID-19 vaccine race in terms of effectiveness of their vaccines. While all three companies have plans to distribute those of their vaccines for now and for the next year, which is 2021, their supply chain represents many hurdles, mainly in terms of distribution. First, it's important to mention that they use a different technology to produce their vaccines, which is mRNA technology, where the vaccine does not include the viral protein themselves, but instead contain the blueprints that instruct your body to create those proteins. This method has not only helped with the research and development stages of the vaccine, but also helped with the manufacturing stage. mRNA molecules are much simpler than proteins as they can be produced with chemicals and do not require synthesis of the virus itself. However, these molecules are much more delicate than traditional vaccines, so they require a much lower freezing temperature for the storage. This gives room for the pharmaceutical companies to increase and capitalize on their storage and distribution capabilities by improving their vaccines' resistance to the heat.
As seen from this table, Pfizer's vaccine would deteriorate within days at a freezing temperature of 0, while Moderna is capable of storing theirs in standard refrigeration for up to 1 month, and AstraZeneca for up to 6 months. This is a huge advantage for AstraZeneca as they're able to access many more customers, whereas Pfizer will have to implement deep freezing equipment at every stage of their distribution process. In addition to these limitations, each company has their own manufacturing limitations. Since Moderna is a very small biotech company and is fairly new to the industry, their capacity is expected to be nearly half of Pfizer's. And as seen from the table again, AstraZeneca takes the lead with 3 billion doses of expected capacity for 2021. AstraZeneca plans to take advantage of its storage and distribution capabilities to supply low-income countries with vaccines for no profit. And on the other hand, Moderna focuses on deals with higher-income countries such as the US government and the European Union, and as a result, this creates a more simple distribution path for Moderna. Overall, Moderna is fairly well positioned in terms of supply chain in comparison to its competitors. For its relative size, it's capable of producing a very large number of doses. And while AstraZeneca seems to be more efficient in terms of supply chain and cost and storage, Moderna is still a leader in the mRNA technology. And to capitalize on their technological advantage, Moderna could outsource manufacturing capabilities in order to supply a larger quantity. But having said this, Moderna must continue to improve its storage capability, as they might soon lose their advantage on Pfizer, who's planning on producing a powder formulation of the vaccine.